The verdict. The council chamber hung in the void like a monument to ancient power. It was a structure built by civilizations that had turned to dust millions of years before humans discovered fire. The chamber itself was a sphere of crystallized starlight, its walls reflecting the colors of distant nebulae. 12 platforms circled the central disk, each one designed for a different form of life, a different way of existing in the universe. Ambassador David Chen stood on the central platform, his simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate forms surrounding him. He was 52 years old, with calm dark eyes and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in rooms where his voice was the smallest. Behind him, through the transparent floor, he could see the spiral arms of the galaxy stretching into infinity. Somewhere down there, lost among billions of stars, was Earth. Today, the Council would decide whether humanity deserved to remain among the spacefaring species of the galaxy. Chen already knew the answer. He had known it for months. The signs had been clear to anyone willing to see them. The first speaker rose from their platform. This was Vornak, High Judge of the Crethean Empire. The Cretheans were an ancient race, their bodies covered in scales that shifted through colors humans had no names for. They controlled the most profitable trade routes in the galaxy and had controlled them for 30,000 years. They did not appreciate competition. The matter before us requires no lengthy debate, Vornak announced, his voice translated into flat human English by the chamber's systems. Humanity has been a spacefaring species for barely 3 centuries. They achieved faster-than-light travel through independent research, without guidance from established powers. They have expanded to 42 colony worlds without seeking proper authorization. They trade with minor species outside approved channels. They are disruptive, unpredictable, and dangerous to the established order. Chen kept his expression neutral. Everything Vornak said was true. Humanity had expanded rapidly, developed technology independently, and refused to ask permission for what they considered basic rights. The Cretheans saw this as arrogance. Chen saw it as survival. The second speaker was Shireen of the Luminary Collective. Her species was beautiful by any standard, beings of flowing energy contained in crystalline shells that caught light and turned it into moving art. They were also deeply traditionalist and viewed physical beings with barely concealed disgust. The humans are biologically primitive, Shireen stated, her musical language rendered harsh by translation. They require specific atmospheric conditions to survive. They consume organic matter in its dead form. They reproduce through physical contact. More troubling, they form emotional attachments to individuals of other species. This is not merely unusual. It is aberrant. They blur the natural boundaries between peoples. They make others question traditions that have existed for eons. Chen's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. He had heard variations of this argument many times. The Luminary believed that species should remain separate, pure, unchanged. The fact that humans made friends across species lines was, to them, a form of contamination. The third speaker was Elder Thrace of the Matherian Concord. The Matherians were so old that their earliest records predated most other species' entire existence. Thrace appeared as a cloud of silvery mist contained in a transparent sphere, his thoughts translated into words through technology Chen barely understood. "We have observed humanity for 300 years, Thrace said, his words carrying the weight of millennia. They are fundamentally unpredictable. Their governments change. Their values shift. Their cultures evolve rapidly. They believe in concepts like individual liberty and personal choice. These ideas are destabilizing. They spread to younger species and cause unrest. They challenge hierarchies that have maintained galactic peace for 40,000 years. Humanity is a chaos factor in an ordered system." The fourth speaker was Commander Charles of the Vraxian Dominion. The Vraxians were a warrior species, massive beings of armored chitin and calculated aggression. They respected strength and despised weakness, but they also understood long-term strategic threats. "Humans are resourceful," Dahl said bluntly. "Too resourceful. They adapt to environments that should kill them. They find solutions to problems that other species abandon as unsolvable. They do not accept limitations. In 3 centuries, they have achieved what takes most species 3 millennia. If we allow them to continue unchecked, they will become a power that rivals the Council itself. This cannot be permitted. The final speaker was Seraph, representative of the ethereal communion. Her species existed partially outside normal space, their forms shimmering between dimensions. They rarely spoke in council sessions, but when they did, others listened. The humans dream differently than other species, Seraph said, her voice like distant music. They imagine futures that do not exist. They believe tomorrow can be better than today. They refuse to accept that the universe has natural limits. This makes them dangerous not through malice, but through their very nature. They will never be content with what they have. They will always push boundaries, always seek more, always change things. The galaxy has achieved stability. Humanity threatens that stability simply by existing as they are. One by one, the 5 great powers made their positions clear. The 7 lesser council members remained silent, knowing their votes were merely symbolic. The real power rested with the 5, and the 5 had decided. The vote was called. 12 voices spoke in turn. 12 times, the word came back the same. Exile. 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 It was unanimous. Vornak rose again, satisfaction evident in the way his scales rippled. Ambassador Chen, the Council has reached its decision. Humanity is hereby formally exiled from Galactic Council space. You will be confined to your current 42 colony worlds. You will cease all expansion beyond these territories. You will end all trade relationships with Council species except for basic necessities. You will have no voice in galactic affairs. You will be quarantined until such time as you demonstrate worthiness for reconsideration. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Chen. This was the moment when exiled species typically broke down. Some begged. Some raged. Some wept. All of them eventually accepted their inferior status and spent generations trying to crawl back into the Council's good graces. David Chen did none of these things. He straightened his jacket, clasped his hands behind his back, and smiled. It was not a bitter smile or a false smile. It was genuine, warm, and utterly unexpected. We understand completely, Chen said, his voice clear and calm. We will comply with all terms of exile. In fact, we'll be gone in 4 months. You won't need to wait longer than that. Confusion rippled through the chamber. Vornak's scales shifted to colors indicating uncertainty. Shirene's crystalline form dimmed slightly. Even Elder Thrace's mist swirled in patterns that suggested surprise. You accept this judgment without protest? Vornak asked slowly. We accept your decision, Chen replied. He offered a formal bow, exactly as deep as protocol required and not a fraction deeper. Humanity thanks the Council for clarifying our position in galactic affairs. We will not trouble you further. He turned to leave. The 2 human diplomats who had accompanied him fell into step behind him, their faces carefully neutral. Wait, Commander Shal called out, his massive form shifting forward. You have nothing else to say? No appeal? No negotiation? Chen paused at the chamber's entrance. He looked back at the 12 platforms, at the rulers who had just condemned his species to isolation and irrelevance. His expression remained pleasant, professional, and completely unreadable. What would be the point? He asked. You've made your feelings perfectly clear. You see us as a threat to your established order. You want us contained and controlled. We could spend years arguing, pleading, trying to convince you that we're worthy of your approval. He paused. But humanity learned something a long time ago. You cannot force people to want you at their table. You can't make them respect you by begging for respect. His smile widened slightly, and there was something in that smile that made several council members deeply uncomfortable. So we won't waste your time or ours. We'll leave. We'll build our own civilization on our own terms. And we wish you well with yours. He walked out. The great doors sealed behind him with a sound like thunder. In the corridor beyond, his two diplomatic aides finally allowed their masks to slip. Marcus Webb, his chief of staff, was shaking with barely contained rage. Sarah Okonkwo, their cultural liaison, looked close to tears. 30 years, Marcus hissed as they walked. 30 years of negotiations, cultural exchanges, trade agreements, all to prove we deserved a place among them. And they just threw it all away because we make them uncomfortable. Not here, Chen said quietly but firmly. Wait. They walked in silence through the station's corridors, past beings of a dozen different species who watched the humans with expressions ranging from sympathy to satisfaction. They reached the docking bay where their vessel waited, a sleek diplomatic ship called the Meridian. Only when the airlock sealed behind them and they were in their own space did Chen allow his professional composure to crack. But he wasn't angry. He was grinning. So? Sarah asked, confused and concerned. How can you possibly smile right now? Chen moved to the secure communications console and entered a code that only 3 humans in the galaxy knew. A moment later, a face appeared on the screen. Admiral Sarah Morrison, commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. She was 60 years old, with silver hair cut military short and eyes that had seen combat in places the Council pretended didn't exist. Ambassador, she said. I've been watching the Council feed. I'm sorry it ended this way. Don't be, Chen replied, his grin widening. They took the bait. Every single hook. They just gave us exactly what we needed. Morrison's expression shifted from sympathy to understanding. A slow smile spread across her face. They gave us permission to stop pretending. Exactly. Chen turned to his confused staff. Did either of you ever wonder why Earth's best scientists haven't published groundbreaking research in decades? Why our most advanced ship designs never appeared at Council exhibitions? Why we've been playing the role of eager students despite having technology that matches or exceeds most Council species? Marcus stared at him. We've been hiding our capabilities. Not hiding, Chen corrected. Preparing. Testing. Developing. All while maintaining the appearance of dependence on Council goodwill. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 52 years. Humanity has been preparing for this outcome since first contact. We hoped it wouldn't be necessary. We tried genuine cooperation. We built real relationships with individual species. But we always knew the Council itself might reject us simply for being different. So we built a contingency plan. A complete parallel infrastructure. Self-sufficient colonies. Independent technology. Alternative trade networks with non-Council species. Everything we would need to thrive without them. Project Exodus, Sarah whispered. She had heard rumors, fragments of conversation between senior diplomats who spoke in careful code. Chen nodded. Project Exodus. 50 years in the making. Hidden research facilities on worlds the Council doesn't monitor. Secret agreements with dozens of minor species who are tired of Council control. Technology development programs that make what we've shown publicly look like children's toys. He looked at Morrison's image on the screen. Sarah, begin Phase 1. With pleasure, Morrison replied. Full withdrawal in 4 months. And David, they're going to watch us leave with every sensor they have. Good, Chen said. Let them watch. Let them see how smoothly we evacuate. Let them see that we don't need their infrastructure or their support. Let them see how little we actually depended on their approval. His smile turned sharp. Let them wonder what else we've been hiding. The transmission ended. Chen stood and walked to the viewport. The Council station hung against the stars, ancient and imposing, a symbol of power that had endured for longer than human civilization had existed. What happens now? Marcus asked, his anger fading into something more complex, anticipation, perhaps, or hope. Chen didn't turn around. Now we go home. We tell our people that the performance is over. We activate every colony, every research station, every hidden asset we've been holding in reserve. We invite all those minor species who've been waiting for an alternative to Council rule. We build something new. And the Council? Sarah asked. The Council wanted to punish us, Chen said softly. They wanted to put us in our place, to make us desperate enough to come crawling back on their terms. He finally turned to face his aides, and his eyes were bright with certainty. Instead, they've set us free. They've released us from any obligation to play by their rules or seek their approval. They've given us permission to become what we've always been capable of becoming. He moved toward his quarters, leaving his staff to absorb the magnitude of what was beginning. The exile was supposed to break us. Instead, it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Behind him, Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. Slowly, understanding dawned. Slowly, their expression shifted from grief to anticipation. The Council had cast humanity out, expecting them to fail, to struggle, to eventually beg for readmission. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. The awakening. For months had passed since the exile vote, and Vornak stood in his private observation chamber, staring at reports that made no sense. The High Judge of the Crethean Empire had ruled trade disputes, territorial conflicts, and diplomatic crises for 2 centuries. He understood power, leverage, and the predictable patterns of species behavior. What he was seeing now violated every pattern he knew. The humans were leaving. That part was expected. What was not expected was how they were leaving. They were taking everything. Not just their people and their vessels. They were dismantling installations they had built in Council space. They were removing medical equipment they had donated to frontier colonies. They were extracting software they had written for communication networks. They were collecting every debt, calling in every favor, and closing every account. They were doing it all with perfect legal precision and with smiles on their faces. This is the 5th report today, said Kelvin, Vornak's assistant, a young Crethean who had never seen his master so unsettled. The Ethereal Communion is reporting that their deep space monitoring stations are failing. Apparently, humans designed the quantum detection arrays 40 years ago. When they left, they took the maintenance protocols and the technical specifications. Vornak's scales darkened with frustration. Those systems were gifts. Standard practice for junior species building goodwill. The humans claimed they were licensed, not gifted. They have documentation. Kelvin hesitated. Very detailed documentation. Our legal scholars are reviewing it. They say the contracts are airtight. This was the problem spreading across Council space. The humans had done nothing illegal. They were following every rule, honoring every contract, fulfilling every obligation to the letter. They were simply choosing not to extend any generosity beyond what was legally required. And it was becoming painfully clear that human generosity had been holding more things together than anyone had realized. Vornak walked to his window overlooking the Crethean capital. The city gleamed with technological wonders collected from 1,000 worlds over 30 millennia. But several districts were darker than they should be. Power distribution problems. The human engineers who had optimized the grid were gone. What else? Vornak asked, dreading the answer. Kelvin consulted his data tablet. The Luminari are reporting a collapse in their cultural export markets. Humans were their largest consumers of art, music, and philosophical texts. Without human buyers, prices have fallen by 60%. Several Luminari academies are facing bankruptcy. They can survive reduced profits. Yes, but there's more. The Vraxian Dominion is experiencing medical supply shortages. Human pharmaceutical companies were providing medications for 17 different Vraxian colony worlds. The contracts expired last month, and the humans are not renewing them. The Vraxians are requesting emergency aid from Council reserves. Vornak closed his eyes. And the Council's response? The other powers are refusing. They say the Vraxians should have maintained their own pharmaceutical infrastructure. They say it's not their responsibility to subsidize Vraxian expansion. This was the fundamental weakness of the Council, and Vornak had always known it. The five great powers cooperated only when cooperation served their individual interests. There was no genuine unity, no shared purpose, no sense of collective responsibility. The Council was an alliance of convenience wrapped in the language of ancient wisdom and galactic order. The humans had understood this. They must have. They had spent 3 centuries watching, learning, identifying every weakness in the system. And now they were pulling out strategic supports that nobody had realized were essential until they vanished. There's something else, Kelvin said quietly. Our intelligence network. We've lost contact with 7 agents inside human space. Vornak turned sharply. Lost contact? You mean they're dead? No, sir. 3 of them have returned to Council space. They resigned from intelligence services. They refuse to discuss what they saw in human territory. They've passed every loyalty test, but they won't accept reassignment to intelligence work. They were compromised. That's what we thought initially. But our psychologists say otherwise. The agents aren't acting like people who were coerced or blackmailed. They're acting like people who changed their minds about something fundamental. Kelvin paused. One of them said something strange before refusing further interviews. He said the humans weren't angry about the exile. He said they were busy. He said they were building something beautiful, and he didn't want to help us destroy it. A cold sensation settled in Vornak's chest. This was not the behavior of a defeated species. This was not the response of a people who had been put in their place. This was something else entirely, something the Council had never encountered before. He pulled up a star chart on his display. Human space appeared as a small cluster in the outer regions of the galaxy. 42 worlds that the Council had graciously permitted them to keep. But as Vornak studied the map with fresh eyes, he noticed details he had missed before. The 42 worlds were perfectly positioned. They controlled access to 4 major resource-rich regions. They sat at the intersection of several minor trade routes that the Council had always dismissed as insignificant. They had natural defensive positions that would make any military assault prohibitively expensive. And they were surrounded by regions of space inhabited by minor species, hundreds of small civilizations that had never been powerful enough or unified enough to earn Council attention. They planned this, Vornak muttered. From first contact, they knew we would reject them. They knew we would exile them. And they prepared for it. He turned to Kelvin. Get me every piece of intelligence we have on human development programs. Everything. I want to know what they've been doing for 3 centuries that we didn't notice. Kelvin bowed and departed. Vornak remained at the window, watching his city and wondering how much of what he saw depended on human systems he had never bothered to understand. Across the galaxy, other Council members were having similar revelations. On the Luminary homeworld, Cultural Minister Prismatic Harmony reviewed attendance records for the Grand Galleries. The number showed a 35% decline in visitors over the past 4 months. Further investigation revealed something troubling. Human tourists had comprised 40% of all gallery visitors for the past 50 years. Their absence left an enormous gap that other species were not filling. Worse, human artists had been creating their own works during their time in Council space. They had studied under luminary masters, learned traditional techniques, and then developed their own distinctive styles. These human works were now circulating in non-Council space, and early reports suggested they were extraordinary. Bold, emotional, innovative in ways that luminary art had not been for millennia. They were our students, Prismatic Harmony said to her assistant. How can students surpass masters so quickly? Her assistant had no answer. The uncomfortable truth was that the luminary had been perfecting the same artistic styles for 10,000 years. Perfection left no room for innovation. The humans had taken what they learned and immediately started experimenting, breaking rules, inventing new forms. In 3 centuries, they had achieved artistic diversity that the luminary had abandoned in favor of eternal refinement. On the Matherian archive world, scholars were reviewing historical records of previous exiled species. The pattern was always the same. Exile led to decline. Decline led to desperation. Desperation led to either absorption back into council control or extinction. No exiled species in 40,000 years had simply accepted their fate and departed with dignity intact. The eldest scholar, a consciousness so ancient that he remembered when the council had only 8 members, expressed a troubling thought to his students. "We exile species to break them," he said, his mist swirling with agitation. "We remove their access to trade, their diplomatic connections, their hope for the future. They are supposed to struggle, to suffer, to eventually come begging for readmission on our terms." "And the humans?" a younger scholar asked. "The humans act as if we have liberated them." The withdrawal continued with mechanical efficiency. Human engineers completed their contracts and departed, leaving detailed documentation for their replacements. Human doctors finished treating their patients, trained local medical staff as thoroughly as time allowed, and left with professional courtesy. Human teachers concluded their academic terms, submitted final grades, and gifted their personal libraries to their students with clear documentation that these were gifts, not institutional property. Nothing was sabotaged. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was done with anger or malice. The humans simply left, and the spaces they had occupied began to reveal themselves as larger and more important than anyone had imagined. In the Council's Central Intelligence Bureau, analysts were compiling a comprehensive report on human activities. What they discovered was alarming. For decades, humanity's most brilliant scientists had been disappearing from public life. They were not dead or retired. They had been reassigned to classified projects on outer colony worlds, projects that no Council intelligence service had successfully penetrated. Human university enrollment had been declining, not because of educational failure, but because talented students were being recruited into alternative programs that left no public records. The 42 colony worlds were not struggling outposts clinging to survival. They were the visible portion of a vast infrastructure that extended into asteroid mining operations, hidden research facilities, and deep space installations that Council sensors had never detected. These installations were not new. Some of them had been operating for over a century. Humanity had been building a parallel civilization for generations. Everything they had shown the Council, their eagerness for acceptance, their gratitude for trade opportunities, their apparent dependence on Council technology, had been theater. They had been playing a role, maintaining an appearance, while quietly preparing for the day when the Council would do exactly what it had done. The exile was not a punishment. It was permission to stop acting. When the intelligence report reached Vornak's desk, he read it 3 times. Then he set it down and stared at his star chart again. The small cluster of human worlds seemed to pulse with hidden significance. How many more worlds were out there, unmarked and unregistered? How many ships had they built that Council sensors had never counted? How much technology had they developed that they had never revealed? "What have we done?" Vornak asked the empty room. His question found no answer, but across Council space, other leaders were asking the same thing. Commander Jal of the Vraxian Dominion reviewed military intelligence reports and felt something he rarely experienced: doubt. The Vraxians prided themselves on strategic analysis. They wargamed every possible conflict, calculated every advantage, prepared for every contingency. Their analysis of human military capabilities had always concluded that humanity was manageable. They had counted human ships, assessed human weapons, and determined that in any conflict, Council forces would achieve victory within 2 years. But those calculations were based on observed human capabilities. What if everything they had observed was only what the humans had chosen to reveal? What if the humans had an entire military infrastructure hidden in deep space, waiting for the right moment to activate? Dahl ordered a complete reassessment of human military potential. The new analysis was sobering. If humanity had been concealing their true capabilities at the same rate they had been concealing their scientific and economic development, then human military forces could be anywhere from 2 to 10 times larger than Council estimates. In a direct conflict, the outcome was no longer certain. The Vraxians were warriors, but they were not fools. They did not fight battles they might lose. For months after the exile vote, the last human ship departed Council space. It was a small diplomatic vessel, the same one that had carried Ambassador Chen to the Exile hearing. It crossed the border markers that separated Council territory from the vast unregulated regions beyond, and then it accelerated toward human space. On the bridge, David Chen stood and watched the Council station fall away behind them. "That's it," his pilot reported. "All human citizens accounted for. All contracts fulfilled. All obligations completed. We're out." Chen nodded slowly. Behind him, through the rear viewports, the lights of Council space faded into the cosmic background. Somewhere back there, billions of beings were just beginning to understand what they had lost. "Send the final message," Chen said. His communications officer opened a channel to Council leadership. The message was brief and formal, exactly what protocol required. "Humanity thanks the Council for your patience during our withdrawal. We have complied with all terms of Exile. We wish you well and will not trouble you again." Then she cut the channel. Chen turned to his crew, and for the first time in 4 months, his smile reached his eyes. "Now," he said, "let's go home. Let's show them what we've really been building." The Meridian accelerated, its engines pushing it toward human space, toward colonies that numbered not 42 but 217, toward research stations that had been developing technology for decades, toward ship construction facilities that had been running at full capacity for half a century. Behind them, the Council was just beginning to realize the magnitude of their mistake. The silence from human space would last for years, growing louder with every passing day as more of their systems failed, more of their economies contracted, more of their minor allies looked toward the humans and wondered if there might be a better way. The humans had been cast out. But they had not been defeated. They had been set free. And the galaxy was about to learn the difference.